lives to heal, to inspire, to revive. We are many, we are one. Our time it has come to revive America. Our mission to inspire each life to live higher, to light the flame and fan the fire. Come answer the call, come one and all, together we will not fall. We are sisters, we are mothers, we are fathers, we are brothers, we are America. We gather here together, of one mind and the same concern. We are champions, we are bold, we have the same goal, to inspire all to learn. It is time for a new beginning, to right the wrongs of the past. As one we will strive, the time has arrived, to heal, to inspire, to revive. You know in your heart that you must do your part. This is your home. We must fight for our rights, for freedom's not free. It's up to you and me. Come take a stand, stand hand in hand, from sea to shining sea. There's nothing we can't do, it's up to me and you. We are America. To heal, to inspire, that's our desire. Revive America.
I was asked to introduce Dr. Carson, and he's a man who needs no introduction. And I tell him he's the guy who never has to wear a name tag because everybody knows who he is. But I thought that I would tell you something that you may not know about him. My husband Ronnie and I have 4 kids, and 25 years ago we faced a tremendous crisis when our youngest son, who was 3 years old, was critically ill. He had spent most of the first 3 years of his life in the hospital, both here in Columbia and at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And right about that time, through the grace of God, MRI technology came along, and somebody said, let's do an MRI of Ian's head and see if we see anything. And luckily they did see something. There was brain and everything there. But the doctor called me that afternoon, and he said, the radiologists don't exactly know how to interpret this MRI, and so I'm going to take it over and ask Ben to take a look at it. Now, I didn't have any idea who Ben was, and the doctor called me again about an hour later, and he said, Ben took a look at it, and Ben said that Ian needs to have brain surgery, and Ben is going to call you later. And so a couple hours later, my new best friend Ben called me, and he was very kind and very gentle and very patient with me, and I was absolutely out of my mind. I'm sure he said many important things that day, but I didn't hear a single one of them because I was a panicked mama. But I can tell you that at the end of our conversation, he said, Ms. Burkett, here's my best piece of advice. We'll both pray, and I'll do my best, and we'll leave the rest up to God. Well, I'm happy to tell you that that little boy is standing right over here. I just spotted him a minute ago. I didn't know he was going to be here. And he's 29 years old, and he's alive. That's the important thing. But I think about Dr. Carson's words very often, and I think about them in relation to our country. And so my best piece of advice to you today is that we will all pray, and he'll do his best, and we'll leave the rest up to God. Amen. I am so honored to introduce Dr. Carson.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I am absolutely delighted to be here. Always happy to be in South Carolina, where I always receive a wonderful reception. And, you know, a lot of times people say to me, after such a wonderful medical career, why would you soil yourself in the field of politics? And I ask myself that too. But I'll tell you why. It's because after all those years of working so hard to provide quality of life and longevity for children, it's very hard to just sit back and relax and watch their future disintegrate in front of my eyes. And, you know, is it possible that the politicians can fix it? Maybe, but I think it's too big a risk to take, because I don't know how much further we can go down this same pathway. And we've had people saying for years, oh, we're going to take care of this and we're going to do that, but it never gets done. It's always the same stuff. So I can tell you, I have a surgeon's personality. Surgeons say, here's the problem, let's do it. And they don't sit around and talk forever about how to get things done. Doesn't mean you don't study the problem carefully. Doesn't mean that you don't get advice. But it does mean that you solve the problem. And, you know, the problems that we have in this country right now, I do not believe that they are Democrat or Republican problems. These are American problems, and we have to stop allowing people to make everything political. We are talking about the survival of our country and the future of those who are coming behind us. And we don't have time for the typical politicians who sit there and try to divide everybody up. You know, they want us to have a war on women. They want to have a racial war anytime there's any conflict between two people of two races. They want to have age wars. They want to have income wars. They want to have religious wars, all for the purpose of empowering themselves and keeping their power base alive and keeping a certain group of people dependent who they can control. And I think it's time for us to move beyond that. You know, part of the problem is that education has languished. You know, the founders of our nation felt that education was key to our success. They said that our freedom and our system is based upon a well-informed and educated populace. And if we ever became anything other than that, the nature of the country would quickly change. And what were they talking about? They were talking about the fact that people who are not well informed are very easy to manipulate. And that's what slick, dishonest politicians and complicit media do. And that's what they have done to our country. And to combat that, it's important for people themselves to become extremely well informed. Everybody thinks they're well informed, but most people are not well informed, quite frankly. You know, I think we know more about who's playing football and who's on Dancing with the Stars than we know about what's really going on in the world. And, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about it today because it's so very important. But I will tell you, there was a time when I was not very well informed. You know, I was not a very good student. I was a horrible student. In fact, I was probably the worst student you ever have seen in your life. I thought I was stupid. Everybody else thought I was stupid. In fact, my nickname was Dummy. That's what everybody called me. When there was ever a joke about somebody being stupid, they just substituted my name. And I didn't like it very much. But I was very good at getting revenge because I was very good at one particular thing, and that was getting other people kicked out of class. I was an expert at that. I would study my classmates and figure out what made them really, really angry.
Okay. Unplug it.
Oh, the generator ran out again. That's the old devil.
You do not have a backup?
We love you, Dr. Carson!
I'm gonna try to project. That's a little tough. What I would suggest is that people kind of fill in this area here.
That works for me.
I don't have to fill out. Yeah. What I was saying was that I was such a horrible student, but I would watch and figure out what made me really angry, and then I would just irritate them until they were about to explode. But I would never push the last button to make them explode until we were in class and the teacher was nearby. And then I would do it and they would explode, and the teacher would kick them out, and I would say, yeah, this is great. I wouldn't be the only one who didn't learn anything that day. But there was this one girl in class. Now you all know this girl. Her name is Miss Goody Two-Shoes. Some of you probably heard. Everything perfect, pristine, on time, made everybody else look like a total jerk. And I said, wow, wouldn't it be great to get her kicked out of class? There was only one problem. She was cool, calm, collected. You could not get under her skin. But I tried. I kept working on it. I finally figured out what made her mad. And the steam was coming out of her ears. And she was about to explode. But I didn't push the last button. I waited until we were in class. Lo and behold, she sat right down at the desk in front of me. I said, the Lord is good. And as the teacher approached, I started irritating her. I pushed the last button, but she didn't explode. She just quietly turned around and she said, you and me on the playground at recess. So that didn't work out all that well. So I became a neurosurgeon and she became a professional wrestler. But I did stop bothering people. But, you know, the kind of student that I was reminds me of so many people that I find today who simply do not put the energy behind informing themselves. And one thing that I highly recommend, to people is that they spend 1/2 hour every single day reading about something you don't know about. Just a half an hour. That's not a very long period of time. I guarantee you, in a year's time, people who haven't seen you for a while will not know who you are. They'll say, who are you? They'll think you were possessed. You'll know so much stuff. And you'll be a different person altogether. And if you continue doing that throughout life, it'll make an incredible difference. You know, we have a tendency in this country to like to pigeonhole people. We say, well, you're this profession. All right. Well, we have a tendency to pigeonhole people when we say, you're in this profession or this occupation, therefore you can't possibly know anything about anything else. Why do they say that about doctors? You know, they don't say that about lawyers. Why is that? I don't know. But But the fact of the matter is, you can learn just incredible things, you know, outside of your field. You know, yes, I'm a neurosurgeon. Yes, I spent a lot of time learning about neurosurgery. But a lot of people don't know that I also sat for 18 years on the board of Kellogg Company. I learned a lot about business, national and international business. That I sat for 16 years on the Costco board. That I was the chairman of the board of Vaccinogen, a biotech company. That we started a national nonprofit, 9 of 10 of which fail. And this one is successful in all 50 states and has won national awards like the Simon Award, which is only given to one philanthropic organization a year out of all of the many thousands. And it comes with a check for $250,000. And the Ronald McDonald Charity Award, also only one organization per year, also a 6-figure check. But we don't do it for the checks, we do it for the effect. Because many teachers tell us when we put a scholar in their classroom, the GPA of the whole class goes up. And we do it, you know, we put reading rooms in communities all over the country. We particularly, in that particular part of the program, target Title I schools, where kids come from homes with no or few books. They go to a school with no library or poorly supported library. They're not likely to become readers. And as you may or may not know, 70 to 80% of high school dropouts are functionally illiterate. So to change that dynamic, we put these reading rooms in that no little kid would possibly pass up, the way they're decorated. And they get points for the number of books they read, and they can turn them in for prizes. In the beginning, they do it for the prizes, but it doesn't take long before it changes the trajectory of their lives. And they start doing much better, and that's what we're attempting to do. We have to have, and this is all funded privately, by the way. This is not a federal program in any way or sense, nor do we want it to be. Because what I have found as I go around and get involved with so many different things is that the programs that actually work, that bring people out of a state of dependency and out of underclass status, are those programs that are designed and operated by we, the people, not the programs by the government. They don't do anything. And in fact, you know, the government started their war on poverty and the new society in the 60s, and since that time has spent at least $19 trillion to get us out of poverty. Now, what have we accomplished? There are 10 times more people on food stamps, more welfare, more poverty, more crime, incarceration, broken families, out-of-wedlock births. Everything that was supposed to be better is not only worse, it's much worse. And, you know, rather than spending time demonizing anybody who created these programs, what we should be doing is saying, if we have a brain, let's put it into gear, and let's look at the things that do work as opposed to the things that don't work. Let's not use ideology to create our policies. Let's use facts and evidence. That's what we need to do in this nation. We have plenty of facts and evidence that show us how to do things. But ideologues, all they do is say, well, I know we tried that and it didn't work, but that just means we didn't do it enough. We need to do more of it. You know, that's just plain stupid. And that's been characterizing how we have done things, and we can do so much better. Well, you know, it wasn't always like that in terms of education in this country. When Alexis de Tocqueville came here in 1831 to study America, because the Europeans were fascinated that this country, barely 50 years old, was already competing with them on virtually every level. Nothing like that had ever been done before. They said, what the heck is going on in America? And one of the things that flabbergasted him was he saw that anybody finishing the 2nd grade was completely literate. He could find a mountain man, the guy could read the newspaper, could tell him how the Constitution worked, could have an intelligent conversation. In Europe, only the aristocracy was able to do that. And, you know, it was because of that that the American settlers were so successful. That's how they moved from one sea to the other sea over a rugged and hostile terrain. They knew how to do things. They knew how to build roads and structurally sound bridges and containment facilities and dams. If something new came up, they knew how to invent something to solve the problem. And when you think about how rapidly we succeeded, it had to do with that can-do attitude that characterized America. And now it's being replaced with the what can you do for me attitude. And we need to get rid of that. We need to stop that right now and reinstill the American can-do attitude. You know, I've been faced many times with people who said to me, "You can't do that. No one's ever done that before." Well, isn't that the reason? Oh, there we are. Okay. Isn't that the reason that God made us in His image? So that we can figure out how to do things? So that we can use the incredible brains that we have? The human brain, billions and billions of neurons. Hundreds of billions of interconnections. Remembers everything you've ever seen. Everything you've ever heard. Can process more than 2 million bits of information per second. How many people here remember your birthday? Let me just see your hand. Okay, it's almost unanimous. Now, what did your brain have to do for you to respond to that question almost instantly? Well, first the sound waves had to leave my lips, travel through the air, enter your external auditory meatus, travel down to your tympanic membrane, set up a vibratory force across the ossicles of the middle ear to the oval and round window, set up a vibratory force in the end of the lymph, which mechanically distorted the microcilia, converting it to electrical energy, which traveled across the cochlear nerve to the cochlear nucleus at the pontomedullary junction. From there to the superior olivary nucleus, sending bilaterally up the brainstem to the lateral meniscus, to the inferior colliculus and the medial geniculate nuclei, across the thalamic radiation to the posterior temporal lobes. To begin auditory processing, from there to the frontal lobes, coming down the tractor victor, retrieving the memory from the medial hippocampal structure in the mammary bodies, back to the frontal lobes at the motor cell level, coming down the bed cell level, across the cortical spinal crack, across the internal capsule, into the cerebral peduncle, descending down to the cervical medullary decussation, into the spinal cord gray matter, synapsing there, going out to the neuromuscular junction, stimulating the nerve and the muscle. So you can raise your hand. And that's the simplified version. Now see if you can get one of those rap singers to do that. But you know, if your brain can do all that in a split second, and you barely have to think about it, what is the human brain actually capable of if we really challenge it and we really prepare it? And we've got some substantial challenges facing us. For instance, I see all the young people out there, and I think about their future, which we are spending up. We have an $18.5 trillion national debt. Now, that's a lot of money. $18 trillion? Think about this. If you tried to pay that back at a rate of $10 million a day, 365 days a year, it would take you more than 5,000 years. That's what we're putting on the backs of our young people. But that's the good news, because it's actually much worse than that. The fiscal gap, that is the problem. And it is something that every American needs to understand. When you go home tonight, look it up, the fiscal gap, because you need to understand this concept. It's the unfunded liabilities that we owe. We don't put these things on the books. It's sort of like an...
It's okay.
I think it's the NSA. They don't want you to know about the fiscal gap. You know, the unfunded liabilities, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of the things that we owe government programs versus the amount of money that we have coming in. And those numbers should be identical. But the fact of the matter is, they're not. There's a gap. You bring it forward to today's dollars, that's what the fiscal gap is. That number sits at $211 trillion. Okay, so you see why I said the 18.5 is nothing. Somebody gave us a check to pay that off today. Some people would be dancing in the street. We're debt-free. They have no idea. It is much worse than that. And, you know, I mentioned the fiscal gap in my announcement speech in Detroit. And the next day, liberal media came out. See, we told you he doesn't know anything. What's he talking about? Fiscal gap. There's no such thing. He's crazy. I don't know. He's just trying to scare people. And then the day after that, Forbes came out with an article that said 17 Nobel laureates in economics and 1,200 economics professors agree with Carson. Well, at that point, that kind of shut him up a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, the only reason we can sustain that level of debt is because we're able to print money. Because we are the reserve currency of the world. A status that generally goes with the #1 economic power in the world, which we have been since the 1870s until last year, when China became the #1 economic power. Would they like to be the reserve currency? You betcha they would. And, you know, they're having some real severe financial issues that they could cover up too, if they could do that. They're working on it, believe me. And we've been afforded a grace period to get this under control. Because what will happen to us if we don't? It'll be much worse than what happened in 1929 with the stock market crash. That will be a walk in the park compared to what will happen in this country. And those people who sit there and try to explode our financial foundation are not the friends of our nation. You know, if I were trying to destroy America, if I were in charge and I was trying to destroy it, what I would do is I would try to pit all the people against each other. I would have a war on women and racial wars and economic wars and religious wars and every kind of war I could think of. I would be stirring it up. And then I would be trying to destroy our financial foundation by driving the debt to unsustainable levels. I'd be trying to get all the people I possibly could on welfare. I'd be importing people from other countries and putting them on welfare. I'd be giving people free phones. I'd be talking about free education for everybody. I mean, I would just explode that thing and hasten the financial underpinnings of this nation collapse. And then I would let the military deteriorate. I would have the smallest naval force since 1917, which we now have, and the smallest air force since 1940, which we now have. I would encourage the sequester so that our captains, majors, lieutenant colonels every month are getting letters saying you need not re-enlist, cutting the heart of the personnel out. You know, I would have a horrible veterans program to discourage people from even getting involved with our voluntary military. Now, any resemblance to what's actually going on right now in terms of what I would do is purely coincidental. But it gives you some idea of the trouble that we're in and why we must fix it. Now, it is fixable. This country is blessed with the most powerful economic engine the world has ever known. And all we have to do is fire up that engine. That means getting rid of the job-killing, incentive-killing requirements. There are all of these incredible regulations that destroy any incentive to do anything. For example, let me just give you an example, one everybody's familiar with. The employer mandate associated with the so-called Affordable Health Care Act. Now, it used to be when you started a new business, you were very excited. You called your mom and you said, "Mom, I started a new business. I got 10, 15, 20 employees." And the next year you had 30 and then 40. Now you get to 40, 45, you say, "Oh, better stop. Because if I get to 50, everything changes." That's a stupid thing. That's actually a job killer, because small business is the economic backbone of this country. We need that to grow in order to create the kind of jobs that allow people to move up the economic ladder. That's craziness. But we have dozens of new regulations every month coming out, and every single regulation costs you money in terms of goods and services. It increases the price. So who gets hit the hardest by that? Poor people. These are things that are not being talked about. And you have the Hillary Clintons and the Bernie Sanders of the world going around and saying the reason that there's this big income cap is because the rich people have too much money. That is not the reason. The reason is these asinine policies. And, you know, we also are suppressing. We're suppressing the interest rates. Now, in a way, we have to, because we have such a big national debt. The debt service on that would be so high if you let the interest rates rise. But think about this. It used to be that Joe the butcher every Friday could go and put, 5% of his earnings in the bank, and he would watch it grow, and it was encouraging to him because you had a 4, 5, 6% increase going on annually. Now you get nothing, so he's not encouraged to do that. People are not saving anymore. So we need to drive the national debt down so that we can allow those interest rates to come up, because the middle class and the lower classes need a mechanism to be able to gather money and to move up the ladder. The only people making money are people who have a risk tolerance which allow them to put money in the stock market. So, that's not the way that our system is supposed to work. We also have to do something about taxes. We have the highest corporate tax